Today's scramble for Africa is seen as a new phenomenon. In fact, the rush for resources reached the shores of the continent many, many moons ago. Monsoon winds dictated by lunar cycles facilitated the trade between East Africa, the Middle East and Asia. The continent's interior offered many riches coveted by the outside world. This movement and the integration of Africans and communities from further north and east created the unique Swahili culture. Today, the Swahili language and people can be found along a 2,800-kilometer strip that stretches from Somalia down through to Mozambique, a testimony to one of the many relationships formed early on with the rest of the world. LAMU in Kenya is one of the oldest and best preserved Swahili settlements. LAMU is a time capsule, unchanged since the town's establishment in the 12th century. All this is about to change. Africa is rising. A young and vibrant population, natural resources, and productive agricultural land are luring global investors. To facilitate this trade, the Kenyan government is building the biggest port in sub-Saharan Africa, a short boat ride away from Lamu's historic Old Town.
I'm just afraid that this port is a big mistake. They have not chosen the right place for it.
Ina faida sana manake kunaingia mameli aina.
You've seen these narrow streets. People are not used to cars and big aeroplanes. What would be the impact if all these huge activities come?
The port could put Lamu back on the map as a trade hub. 5 centuries ago, Lamu was a thriving town and gateway. The trade in mangroves, ivory and slaves created many wealthy businessmen on the island. This all changed in 1907 after the abolishment of slavery. Lamu's glory days quickly came to an end. Its population declined, and Lamu's only appeal was its rich history. This romantic past appealed to Christina. The island's historic architecture and mix of Arab, Asian and African influences lured her to the island in the roaring 70s.
Here I'm at the seafront on one of these old cannons, and I've just arrived. I'm discovering town. I'm feeling very much at home. I think I can see that on the picture. I'm adopting slowly. This is my first 3 weeks here. 1974.
She fondly remembers the Arab traders from her first visit to Lamu.
When all these dark-haired, men came into Lamu, you saw them in shops. They came with their goods. They sold amber. They sold, jewelry. They sold perfumes. It's a very romantic idea that we grow up with in the Western countries, that this is the East, this is the Orient, this is, how it's been for ages.
Christina sold her successful hotel business in Sweden and made a permanent move to Lamu. She fell in love with and bought a 200-year-old mansion, turning it into a boutique guest house.
So this is Subira House, which was before called Liwali's house. Liwali is the word in Arabic for a governor. And we needed a softer name, so we named it Subira House. I think it sounds nice. It is a nice meaning in Swahili. It's a very rich meaning. It not only means to wait in patience, it also means to wait while you are enjoying waiting. I like that idea. It's a house of 2 courtyards, which is also not so common, this big one. And then for the ladies' area, the 4 bedrooms has a smaller courtyard, not such elaborated arches. And then there is the small garden. You can imagine they slaughtered one cow every day to feed everybody. There were like 100 people eating under this liwali. His 4 wives, their helpers, his helpers, all the people who worked in their shambas. Lots of people. She has been a slave here. She's been working for the son of that liwali. And she came to the house. She could immediately see any changes we'd done to it. Actually, most of the work we've done is to put the house back to how it used to be.
Raya has been an activist for several years. She travels around the island campaigning on development issues that affect her community.
Kisha na mashairi tulikuwa tumesema wapatikane watu wa hapa watapawa, si lazima kuinuka, hata kama utajifunga ninja tukupe speaker utoe hapo, kisha watu watatusaidia kupiga zile pembe. Lakini muhimu ni mupate maudhui. Muhimu si ngoma, muhimu ni maudhui muyapate hawa wamezungumza nini.
Raya is part of a collection of civil society groups that has been against the port from the start.
When the government announced that they're going to build the port, we thought that they would consult with the community and tell them that this project is coming. These are the disadvantages of the project, these are the advantages, but the government ignored all this and they came and started the groundbreaking. So we were like, what is going on?
Tumefurahi na tumaini nyinyi pia mumeelimika na mumefurahi kwa sisi kuwekwa hapa, sawa?
Kwa jina naitwa Alisua Bakari. Mimi nilizaliwa wa Kizingitini. Na nilizaliwa ikiwa mimi kama mtoto mdogo nilipokuwa mimi sikwenda shule kusoma. Nilisoma madrasa muda mdogo alafu nikaingia baharini. Nikawa kazi yangu navua samaki. Nikavua samaki mwaka 52, ikifika ni 63 nikaacha kazi ya samaki nikaingia upande wa lobster wa Deva. Sasa ninaenda baharini kuvua. Na ninakutoka kuvua, ninaenda kuvua kwa mshipi. Nitavua kwa mshipi, badala maji yakiwa tayari kisha pia huko nitabadilisha na itakuwa Deva. Nitafanya kazi ya Deva. Niangalie samaki, niangalie lobster. Kwa hivyo ndio kazi mimi nitafanya leo. Kuendesha boti nimeendesha miaka mingi sana. Nimeendesha boti ya uvuvi kutoka mwaka 52. Hii kazi inachokesha, lakini kulingana na hali ya maisha haiwezi kuchokesha kwa sababu sio sasa kwamba imekuja mabadiliko, kuna engine, kuna speedboat, lakini sisi hatukudhovea kwa sababu kulingana na yale mapato ambayo tunapata nikitumia mafuta kwa boti kama hii ndogo na ule uvuvi ambapo kwamba yale mapato tunapata itakuwa haniridhishi. Ni babangu. Na babangu alinifunza ni babu wangu. Ni asili yangu. Uvuvi ndio asili yangu.
This is one of Captain Ali's favorite fishing spots. But the new port will be built nearby, and he will be forced to fish out in the deep sea.
Mimi yangu amekwisha. Sasa huyo mtoto wangu, mtoto ndugu wangu, jamii tafaidika. Lakini sio mimi. Maanake hata itapokumaliza kujenga sijui kama nitakuwa niko au nimeenda. Lakini natarajia kwamba vizazi ambavyo zitakuja vitafaidika.
Christina's off to the market. This is her favorite route. The narrow streets and magnificent stone buildings are what made her fall in love with the place.
It's really like we are in a live museum. A museum very special, where people still live. That is the interesting thing about LAMU. We walk around in the old history. And this has always been so. I don't think any streets have been altered, have been changed. In Sweden, when there's snow and ice, everything's frozen, you don't find anything fresh from the country. All is imported, all the vegetables are imported, or you depend on the roots. But here, you know, we have so many seasons, there's so much to be done.
Captain Ali is all changed and ready to catch some lobsters. That's where he makes the real money. He's hoping that one of the other 700 fishermen on the island haven't been here. There are no lobsters here today.
Maisha ya mvuvi yako kama kawaida, sikupata sikukosa.
When I rinse this, I don't use running a hotel or a guest house is always different, and it's always never boring. Here in Kenya, it's much easier because we can employ more people. We were working for 30 years in Sweden, and it was really tough because you cannot afford stuff.
Like many people in the tourism industry, Christina is concerned that the proposed port might change the spirit of LAMU. Her little piece of paradise might never be the same again.
I think we can't believe it's coming. I don't think we'd see it's true. Now there's a big port house coming up. So, of course, we're shaking, but we can't believe it's coming. You know, they can't do that. Not to this place. It's too sad.
The new port will span across 28,500 hectares on land and sea. The port is part of a bigger plan, LAPSET, aimed at connecting Kenya with South Sudan and Ethiopia through an elaborate network of roads, railways, ports and international airports.
Yeah, basically we are looking at the master plan of the LAMU port. And LAMU, you're going to have one of the biggest ports.
LAMU itself will house oil pipelines, refineries and an industrial complex.
We have an area which is about 8 kilometers. So Lamu is supposed to be a major hub.
This is Kenya's single most ambitious project to date.
Lamu Port is not something new. It was a conception in 1974-75. The reason why Lamu was not developed then was because of the insecurity at that particular time. We didn't have proper roads, we didn't have proper infrastructure. So the problem was shelved. But the idea to have an alternative port has always been there. It's mandatory to do environment and social impact assessment. We did that study on how the port is going to affect the marine environment, how the port is going to affect the land, how the port is going to affect the people. We have an assessment to that effect. The other issue will be the fishermen, because with the being heavy vessels coming in to the port, then the smaller fishermen, fishing boats will not be allowed, may not be allowed to fish around the area because of safety reasons. So the fishermen will also be compensated so that they can now fish into the deep sea as opposed to just fishing within the confines of the port.
LAMU Fort was built in 1813 after LAMU's victory over neighbouring Mombasa and Pate Island in a historic battle for territory, the Battle for Shella Island. Since then, the fort has been central to the community. These days, the fort is being used by Raya to fight a different kind of battle.
Lamu is a World Heritage Site, so we were wondering what will happen to our cultures that we've been preserving for almost 50 years. An influx of people will be coming. The government is telling us that almost 500,000 people will come with the port. So we were wondering how are we going to preserve our culture? There'll be an increase of HIV/AIDS prevalence. So if a lot of people come, that means they will mingle, maybe they will intermarry. So the HIV rates will go up. Na sisi kama watu wa civil society, na sisi tuna jukumu letu la kuelimisha jamii. Kwa hivyo tumetumia jengo lile ambalo zamani lilikuwa ni jengo baya, watu wakifungwa hapa ndani kufanya mambo mazuri ndani yake.
Brian's not your average local tourist. He's not here for a simple walk on the beach, unless he's buying it. Attracted by the future port, he's here to seek opportunity. A successful real estate businessman in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, Brian is very optimistic about Lamu's potential. He's not alone. Recently, Lamu has seen an influx of investors looking to purchase land and set up shop. Brian is visiting landowners near the proposed port site on Lamu mainland. He goes door to door, haggling for a good deal.
Very good. Yes.
I believe Lamu is the place to be at the moment. Yeah. If you have any investment portfolio, you should look at having something in Lamu. Intention is first to come and find out whether she's actually selling a property. Then the second is to find out whether she has the documentation, the right documentation for the property. After that, you discuss on the price.
1 million moja, patia 5 million.
5 million patia yote cash, 5 million. The visit has been quite helpful because one, I've seen what the changes have been in LAMU. I've also been able to see the properties that I have here, and also been able to see what the new places to look for is. So it has been extremely, extremely helpful, yeah.
Brian was one of the first investors to buy land 3 years ago. His investment has been more than worth it.
You feel quite good because you can imagine you bought something at less than 500,000 only to come back in 2 years and find out it has gone up by about 500%. For any investor around the world, they'll be quite happy to see that, yeah. But now the next step would be to actually have value, to create value on that land.
Hii poti mimi siwezi kupinga, niliona ni manufaa na nikatamani. Mimi mwenyewe nilitamani. Nilienda Djibouti nikakuta poti ilitengenezwa poti kama hii ambayo tutatengeneza sisi. Sasa mimi nikaona poti kwamba hapo imejengwa na kuna watu wengi ambao wanafanya kazi na kila mtu anapata riziki yake. Dada kuna sai. Dada. Kulingana na maisha ile kazi iliyokuwa hapa kazi iliyoko ni punda, sukuma mkokoteni. Hiyo haitoshi.
Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaba. Ya mgambo ikilia ujue ipo na jambo. Hii ni ishara tosha kwamba kipindi cha barazani ndivyo hivi kinang'wananga. Ninavyoongea na wewe nimetia kambi katika eneo la Lamu. Nipo Lamu, nipo eneo la Lamu Fort hapa. Katika eneo la Lamu Fort ndio nitakao kwenda kufanya kipindi hiki cha barazani. Natumai barazani ya leo itakuwa ni moto. Ni kuhusiana na swala zima la upande wa baadhi ya mambo yanayowakumba wakazi wa eneo hili la Lamu na serikali.
Kila siku sisi twasema lau serikali ingelikuwa ina pahali pengine pa kuweza kupeleka huu mradi, sisi hatungeupata. Sasa lakini ikaswadifu ya kuwa mradi ule uko kwenye ardhi yetu, sisi kama wakazi wa Lamu. Tukisema wenye ardhi ni kidogo, mimi sina ardhi kule, lakini nataka hata mjukuu wangu na yeye aonje manufaa ya pale kutolewa kuwa na ardhi. Sisi tumetaguliwa kama ni watu ambao tunaishi kwenye heritage site. Na hiyo ni hofu nyingine pia imekuja kwa ajili ya bandari. Kwa hivyo ni jukumu la serikali ije chini, shauriane na watu, kukiwa na jambo kuwe na mawasiliano, lakini ridhaa zitolewe kama jamii ya Lamu, sio walioshika ardhi peke yake. Asante.
Lamu, frozen in time since its decline over 100 years ago. It's known more for being an idyllic getaway than for its past glory as a wealthy trading center. The new port could be a reboot of 5 centuries of trade.
I don't think it was a coincidence when those our forefathers chose Lamu. It was not a coincidence. I think they acknowledge the potential of Lamu. So that's why even after searching all through the Kenyan coast, we still came back to Lamu as the most ideal place for a port.
The winds of change are lapping at the shores of Lamu. This will mean different things to the people who call it home.
You have this beautiful coast. What kind of tourism are they planning for? Everybody says, oh, Lamu town will not be affected. Of course it will.
Mimi nafikiria kwamba nikiunga ile poti naona kwamba wajukuu zangu kazi pale na watafaidika.
There are animals living there, there are people living there, we have wildlife, we have the mangrove trees. So what is going to happen to them?